Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you, and Reader's Magnet, and thank you, John, for putting this forth and taking the chance on us authors in presenting this out to the world.
I've enjoyed this immensely, Joanne.
Ellie, so have I. Thank you for who you are, and thank you, Reader's Magnet. You all are beautiful, and you've worked so very hard, and we are blessed.
We are.
I thank everybody that's involved with this process, because we know writers need readers and writers need publishers. We thank Reader's Magnet and everybody that's involved. I love Reader's Magnet. They say, we share your stories with the world.
Good morning, everybody. My name is RHONDA RUBINSON. I'm an Episcopal priest in the Diocese of New York. I live in Manhattan. That's where I'm coming to you from today. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Reader's Magnet for this really magnificent festival, for this opportunity to see and come into contact with so many authors and books and points of view and people. It's been a wonderful experience. I believe today is the last day of the festival. I'd like to particularly thank Rox, who has been my contact for Reader's Magnet and the Festival of Storytellers, and Red Sanchez, who is the stage manager, who's been doing a lot of, who's been coordinating all of the technical aspects of my appearances. So in 2008, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Very large, invasive 3.5-inch tumor in my right breast. And as a priest, I knew at the time that if I was going to have to go through this process, that it was to help other people, in addition to me going through the process and work on my own healing. So I took notes during the process of the chemotherapy, the surgery and the radiation, both before and after, all of that. And eventually that wound up being a book that I put together for other people who are going through the experience of a diagnosis of a serious disease like cancer, or even COVID, or possibly even a serious accident. Really for anybody who has been blindsided by something that is life-threatening for themselves or to someone close to them. The book is called Lessons of the Spirit, a spiritual companion for your breast cancer journey. And here it is in English. It was also translated into Spanish because a lot of people in my congregation come from the Dominican Republic, and many of them unfortunately had breast cancer too. So in Spanish, it's called Lecciones del Espíritu. Lecciones is available on Amazon. Lessons of the Spirit, you're better off going to my website, which is scrolling at the bottom of the screen, and going to the book excerpt in my website and taking a look at ordering information. If you have any questions, email me directly. My email is in my website, but it's also, in case you'd like to write it down right now, it's rev, .RHONDA RUBINSON, my name, at gmail.com, and I can help you I can help you get a copy of the book for yourself or for someone else. The reason I wrote it was because as I was going through this process, and by the way, I'm 13 years cancer free. So it all worked, for me. I was tremendously blessed. I learned a great deal. And I've been able to live to tell the story, literally to tell the story. But I did it because there was a gap in the information out there for people who were dealing with things like breast cancer. There's plenty of medical information. There's plenty of information about hospitals and treatments and drugs and different approaches to cancers, information on nutrition. There's information on everything really, but how to spiritually handle a diagnosis of something like breast cancer. And I wrote this book to fill the gap. The book is partly an autobiography, but it also is a meditation. There are prayers. There's practical advice as to really how to approach every day and every facet of treatment. Because cancer doesn't just attack your body. I think anybody who knows it, who has had it, or knows somebody who has it or has had it, knows that it attacks your body, your mind, your soul, your spirit. It attacks everything. And your spirit really is in kind of the captain of all of this. What's happening in your body can be really frightening and really awful, but your spirit, if you can keep your spirit strong, you can cope with all of this. Good morning, Fairgoer number 2275. So you can see on the screen, there's a chat. Thank you. Thank you. Actually, this cover was designed by the original publisher, Miro Publishing, but I took the photos of the objects that are on the front cover. And then I had a friend of mine sort of reproduce it, who's a graphics designer for the Spanish for the Spanish version. So I know that many of you are probably going to have questions, and please post them in the chat as we go through, and I'm happy to answer them as I see them and as I can. Whatever answers I give you are under the heading of, advice from my point of view as an Episcopal priest. They're not necessarily proscriptive. They're not. They don't deny other approaches, and the answers I give you are meant to provoke more thought and maybe more research on your part as to what might work for you. Because the thing you learn pretty quickly about cancer is that you cannot predict outcomes, and that everybody's cancer journey is different. You may have a diagnosis that looks very similar to somebody else's, but it turns out that your body is different, and the way you react to drugs is different, and your psyche is different. And so there's no two journeys that are exactly alike. So I just want to be, clear about that from the outset, that there's no one size fits all here. And if you have a good doctor, by the way, the doctor will tell you this, because that's actually one of the things you should look for in a doctor, is to look at you as an individual and not necessarily compare you to a textbook. I started off with an awful doctor when I was going through the process. I was sent by my gynecologist to a breast surgeon who I instantly disliked and who treated me basically like I was something in a textbook, and didn't like it from the moment I met her. And I actually went home and put myself on a prayer list for the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, where I was baptized and where I've worked on and off, and which is just a few blocks south of where I'm sitting now. I have a lot of friends there. And I found my surgeon that I wound up sticking with, who was at NYU Langone, through that prayer list. You can find information through people who care about you, through your community. The important thing is finding people you trust to help you go through this journey, because trusting your doctors is really the most important things. Doesn't mean you're not going to have questions, doesn't mean that things aren't going to go exactly as planned, and maybe they switch things up. But working with people that you have confident in their ability to, in their judgments, you want them to be looking at you as an individual, working as a team. The surgeon and the oncologist should be working as a team. Sometimes there are other people involved as well. Sometimes there are hormonal experts, sometimes nutritionists. I mean, there's a number of people that can form your care team. And it's very important that you be comfortable with that. And because once you are, that frees you up to really sort of focus on your healing. So if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. I'm happy to, to answer anything that you put there. And while we're waiting for you to think of questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just give you an idea of what's in the book. I'm going to go through some of the chapter headings. It is a great Sunday, isn't it? It's a great Sunday to be alive. Where I am, the weather is beautiful, if a little chilly. And I've just come from Mass, so it is a great Sunday. And any day that that you're alive and you get to take part in something like this festival is a great Sunday. So the book begins with a prologue that starts, "How did I get here?" My cancer was stage 4. I had a 3.5-inch tumor in my right breast, in the upper part of my right breast, and it was stage 4, invasive, and very dangerous. It went away under chemotherapy. It essentially vanished. It melted. And under chemotherapy, prayer, I did not need a mastectomy. That may surprise you. Surprised me. I wound up only having to have a relatively minor lumpectomy because the thing was gone. And then I had radiation treatment after the chemo, then the surgery, then the radiation. Radiation essentially to clean up anything that might have been accidentally left. But it was stage 4. So I've been clear of stage 4 cancer since 2000. I count my date of being cured as October 24th, 2008. That was my surgery day. My radiation went into the beginning of 2009, but it was very, very serious cancer, and it's gone. It's gone, and it was, like I said, it was frightening, and was treated with a great deal of urgency, let's say. So the prologue begins, "How did I get here?" One of the first questions everybody has when you're blindsided by diagnosis of a serious cancer or some other disease that that it could be life-threatening is, why me? How did I get here? Did I do something? What's my family history? Did I provoke this, in some way? And the book deals a lot actually with those feelings sometimes of guilt and your own searching of your own history of trying to figure out why you were visited with this. A lot of people think that God punishes them with cancer. God never punishes anybody with cancer. That is not God. People run into cancer. Good people run into cancer. Not so good people run into cancer. Everybody sins some point in their life. Not everybody runs into cancer, but some saintly people that probably have died of cancer. So that's not. That's really, it's not a question that should be asked in that way. I've been telling people in the live streams that I've been doing for this book that as a priest, I've had so many people sit down in front of me who have been diagnosed with something like cancer. The first question is, what did I do? Can I repent and then this thing will go away? Thank you. I'm glad that you apparently have been you've been listening to me before. Thank you for returning. Fair goer number 991. I had one 90-year-old woman who was completely convinced that her cancer diagnosis that happened to her at age 90 was punishment for the fact that she cheated on her boyfriend when she was 14 or 15. She really did think that, and I had a hard time convincing her that could not be the case, was not the case. We tend to view God as both kind of a spy. I mean, God, of course, knows everything that we do and why we do it. But that doesn't mean that God is waiting for the chance to pounce on us, and and hit us with something really, really bad, in punishment, something like cancer. Now, that doesn't mean that it cannot be used. That serious diseases cannot be used to reconstruct your relationship with God, or to improve your character, or to get you to pay more attention to how you treat other people or yourself. There are things we can do to provoke cancer. Of course, we know things like smoking, for example, will provoke cancer. There are things that we have that are not our fault at all that can provoke cancer, like genetic mutations can have that effect. But most cancers, they really don't know where they come from. I was told that. My doctors, I said, where did this come from? I have no cancer history in my family, none. No reproductive cancers, and some minor skin cancers, things like that, but absolutely nothing like a breast cancer or a prostate cancer or an ovarian cancer, nothing like that. And my doctors both said that they didn't know, but that they were seeing an awful lot of what I walked in with. The very sudden, very aggressive, very large breast cancer that they believed was in some way environmental, and they really don't have any idea what caused it. Environmental being food, water, radiation, something in the environment. Could be anything, pollution. Can you tell that you were cancer free? Yeah, well, my doctors tell me all the time. I still go for follow-ups. I saw my breast surgeon and my oncologist just a few weeks ago. I get regular mammograms and sonograms. The blood tests have markers in them that can tell if you're fighting something like a cancer. And that's how I know I'm cancer free, is that I'm still being watched 13 years later. And I'm being watched partly because I'm something called a triple negative, which means that I can't be on post-cancer treatment drugs. That some people take things like tamoxifen and Herceptin, things like that. I'm not eligible for them. They wouldn't work on me. One of the advances that they've made in cancer treatments, and they're making tremendous advances, by the way, in cancer treatments, particularly reproductive cancer treatments, is that they can test your blood and tell what drugs are likely to work and what drugs are not compatible with the markers in your blood. And so they picked out drugs that they thought would work on me. They said they didn't know how well they would work, but they should work, to a certain extent. So they gave me a great deal of chemo over the summer of 2008. And after that, when I went in for the MRIs and the PET scans, it showed that basically everything was gone, and that what wasn't gone was dying. So the chemo worked very, very well on me. I believe, as a priest, that an Episcopal priest, that the chemo was certainly augmented by prayer and by communion. That's in the book as well. I think that there's, a holistic approach doesn't only mean things like diet and exercise. It also means your spirit. It also means, your spiritual life and how you are approaching this from the point of view of your faith. And it all very much worked for me and got me cancer free, which I am to this day, and for which I'm very, very thankful. And I view it as part of my job now as a priest and as a person to help other people, try to cope in the same way. Any other questions in the chat? Okay, waiting for them. Then we will go on in the book. The first section, there were really two large sections in the book. The first has to do with the patient, the person who has been. Why are churches filled with riches when Jesus asked his followers to give their wealth away? Good question. I don't know. I'll tell you though that our churches in the Diocese of New York are not filled with riches. We're not. We don't fill. Well, two different approaches. I am also, in addition to being a priest, I'm an artist. I've painted, I've written, I've been a lighting designer most of my life. There is something to say about creating beauty in the name of God, and that inspires people to worship God. That is different than flaunting money or flaunting wealth. Flaunting money and flaunting wealth is absolutely not what you want to be doing in a church. And I agree with you that Jesus would be appalled at a lot of what happens in churches. Churches exist for people. The people do not exist for the wealth or for the building. So I agree with you 100%. I think it's very obvious when you look around at the world today, and when you listen to various preachers of various ilks and look at various churches in various places, that a lot of people don't get the message that Jesus was really preaching, and he was preaching, to essentially include everybody in society, and to minister to everyone in whatever their need is. So I hope that that answers that a little bit. That's not really directly related to the book, but thank you for asking. So there's two large sections in the book. The first one is for the patient, coping with diagnosis and treatment, faith and practice. In other words, for the person who has been diagnosed, the person who is now coping with this suddenly, the person who has had their life changed and has now been thrown into a world that they never thought they would be thrown into, the world of cancer. You wind up in the medical system in a way that can be very, very intimidating, scary. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. You don't know if you're able to do this. Part of the reason I wrote this book is to convince people that you can do it. You absolutely can do it. Okay, I'm glad. Thank you. I'm happy to be helping you, and happy to be preaching, essentially, through this live stream. So I wrote it to help the patient know that you can do this. One of my first reactions when I was diagnosed was, how am I going to do this? I'm a single woman. I've never been married. I don't have kids. I don't have a partner. My family did not live close to me. My mother was coping with my stepfather, who had Alzheimer's when I was diagnosed. She was not capable of taking care of me. She was in New Jersey. The rest of my family lives in Baltimore. That's a whole thing in and of itself, is knowing that God will send help if you're faithful. God did not give man cancer. The devil cured him to subvert God's plan. How would you know it wasn't a divine miracle? What if he was an unkind atheist homosexual? Okay, I don't believe any of the last three things that you've listed there are necessarily of the devil at all. And I think that God loves many more people than we give God credit for. I had a rector at a church once who was asked after Pope John Paul II died whether he went to heaven, because this was a person who really disliked the Roman Catholic Church, had a bad experience, and my rector thought for a second and said, yes, I'm sure he's in heaven, and I'm equally sure that he's surprised who's there with him. So you have to be careful what you think God gives people. We have taken God's world and subverted it in many ways. We've created many unhealthy things. We have been given free will. We can harm each other. We can harm the environment. We can do all sorts of harm. And unfortunately, many of us take that opportunity, to do that. And so a lot of what we blame on God is really us, doing things to each other. And God just doesn't, he will not force us to stop. God invites us to stop and turn to health giving instead of death dealing. What are your thoughts on the Word of God being effective in this digital age of social media? I think that social media is both a godsend and a curse. Social media obviously can help spread the Word of God. People, for example, now I guess this isn't social media in the classic sense, but this virtual book fair is making it possible for me to talk to probably many, many more people than I've ever spoken to live in person inside of one of my churches that I've served at or preached at. So it's an immense opportunity. But it's also, as we have seen, it's a recipe for destruction. It can be a source of tremendous misinformation. I also think that it encourages something that's very unhealthy, which is thinking that you can get all you need through very rapid, quick sound bites, tweets, short articles, phrases. Faith takes work. Faith takes work. Anything that is worth having takes work. And you really have to work away from the screen in order to develop your faith. You have to go ahead and read scripture. You have to research scripture. You have to find out the context in which it was written. You have to pray about it. You have to spend time alone. You have to spend time learning, with people who know more than you do. You have to try things and see if they work. You have to develop a prayer life. And by the way, prayer is a developable skill. If you work at it, you will get better at it. There's no question about it. It's like anything else. It's like playing a violin. If you want to get better, you got to do it. And you can't just, do it once or twice. And if things don't turn out the way you want to, just drop it. Because that's not what prayer is about. Prayer is a relationship and a dialogue with God. And so, it needs the same care that any relationship does. When you declare a miracle, does this mean you understand everything that is possible in nature? I have never really declared a miracle. I don't think we in any way know everything that is possible in nature. I think that our knowledge is extraordinarily limited. We obviously have exploded in knowledge in the past, especially century and a half. Maybe back a little further than that. Let's go back to, say, Isaac Newton. So we're talking 17th century, like that. I don't think there's any way we can know everything that's in nature. The fact that nature, by the way, is so wonderful and diverse and brilliant and complex and so beautifully designed, I think is a proof of God. And I think that's a miracle. I also think we're surrounded by all sorts of things that we don't think are miracles, and they're miracles every day that we don't recognize as such because they become ho-hum and ordinary to us. I think each of us, in a lot of ways, is a miracle. We don't understand how we become conscious. We don't understand a lot about how we function in the world and our sort of sensory relationship with the world. There's all sorts of worlds out there that we really know hardly anything about. So miracles is, I think when we use the word miracle, we use it to describe an occurrence that should not have been possible with what we know about nature. And that can be somebody being cured of something that was fatal. I view that, I guess, as miraculous in myself. But I also think that miracles are far more common, than we think. I think we have a tendency to downplay things that happen that are extraordinary, that are really miraculous in their nature. Same rector who answered that question about heaven that I quoted a few minutes ago said that coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. Coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. A lot of stuff that happens in our lives that in fact has been orchestrated by God, that where we have been guided to particular people or particular situations. In my case, it certainly was the doctors that I was guided to. And that is God's hand. And I suppose every time that happens, you can call it a miracle. I hope that helps. That was longer than I expected that to be, but okay. So there's two sections in this book. The first was for the patient. Then there's a section at the end for caregivers, for people who are walking this journey with people who have cancer, and what to say, what not to say. I realized when I was undergoing the treatment that I, as a priest, had taken care of, ministered to people who had very serious cancers for the first 8.5, 9 years that I was a priest, and that I didn't know what I was doing. I said a lot of things that maybe were, well, very well meaning, certainly, but that once I had the cancer, I didn't want to hear from anybody. I did things, same thing. You think you're helping, but you're not necessarily helping. You know, you're giving cancer patients food, for example, without asking them whether they could eat that kind of food or whether they wanted that kind of food or whether they wanted food at all. Sometimes chemo patients can't really eat. You know, some things that you say are harmful without seeming so. So, two large sections. Did my cancer diagnosis draw me closer to God? Absolutely. It absolutely did. It wasn't just the diagnosis. The diagnosis can actually throw you away from God. It was the whole process. It was the walking through the process. And it was the taking every day, waking up and knowing that you have to trust God to get through the day. Waking up and knowing that this is a day that you're scheduled to take chemo, and that this is going to make you sick. You know, you are in a lot of ways forced to trust much more than you would if left to your own devices. But that's the position we should be in all the time, whether we have cancer or not, which is trusting God with every day. We don't know what's going to happen on any given day. Look, we found that out over the past year and a half, excuse me, 18 months. We never know when the last time we're going to do something is going to happen necessarily. I didn't know on March 15th in 2020 that was going to be the last time we were going to celebrate Mass in our church for a year and a half. We didn't know that we were going to get hit by this wave of pandemic that was going to change society and change the way we do things and change everything. Because there is so much change, and because change is inevitable, and because there is so much out there that can throw us for a loop, our stance every day should be to get closer to God and to trust God more and more, because God is eternal. God is solid. God will always be there. Everything you see around you, everything we have around us, is going to change, and it's going to pass, and it's going to morph from one thing into another thing. But it's not going to be the same, you know, as it is today. And that goes for everybody's life. Rape wasn't always a crime in the Middle East. Is that why do not rape is not part of the Ten Commandments? I have first of all, rape was a crime. There's a rape of Dinah in the Bible that is considered a horrid sin in the Jewish law, and in fact, a couple of Israel's sons, a couple of Jacob's sons, get into tremendous trouble for the way they avenge that rape. I don't believe the Ten Commandments. You can't read them literally. For example, Orthodox Jews who understand the Ten Commandments with a great deal more depth than we sometimes do if we just read them, will consider murder to be not only taking somebody's life physically, but slandering somebody. Okay? I could see where murder could also cover rape, you know, in the same context. When you're taking someone's life away, you know, in some manner, that is considered murder. In the context of the Ten Commandments, in the broader you know, understanding of the Ten Commandments and of Jewish law, that if you research it, you're going to find that almost everything in the Bible has meanings that cover every eventuality. So that's not. I mean, that really isn't the case, and should never really be considered the case. And you know, I would recommend going and buying a book or finding online some information about, about each of the Ten Commandments and how many multiple interpretations you can have of them. Because almost every sin that you can possibly commit, what we understand to be crimes against others and against God that you can possibly commit, is covered by the Ten Commandments somewhere. But you have to, again, not be literal, The Bible is not a literal book. There are many, 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 many layers to it. You have to go beyond, beneath the text, within the text, explore the text, explore the context of the culture, and the double, triple, quadruple, multiple meanings of everything that happens and everything that is said in the Bible. It's not a superficial read. It really isn't. It needs, like I said, it needs effort. It's part of the reason that that social media and the way we approach things on social media is so dangerous for people of faith, because we can then go and approach things like the Bible and our faith lives in that same kind of quick fix, microwave it for a minute and it's done, social media manner. And that's tremendously dangerous. You shortchange yourself if you do that. Okay. Anything else on the chat? Let's see what time is it? Okay, we've got about another 20 minutes. So again, going back to the table of contents, the moment of diagnosis is not the time to worry about repentance. We spoke a little bit about this. There is obviously a time and a place for repenting. But when you're diagnosed, your first thought should not be, oh my God, what are my sins? How can I correct them? Your first thought should be, how do I find a good doctor, get into treatment, and prepare myself, for this journey. Then there is, who is my doctor? Allowing God to lead you to the right healer. Who will take care of me? Will I die? Yes, everybody's going to die. But whether you're going to die of cancer is still very much a question, even for people with a serious diagnosis, as I had. We all know people who were diagnosed with what were thought to be minor cancers or minor maladies, and who had bad outcomes, and who did in fact pass from this life into the next because of them. And we all know people who have had very serious diagnoses and have done extremely well. And those people, by the way, are becoming more and more and more. So there's a lot of hope out there, and a lot of really good research and really good treatments, even since the time I was diagnosed. In the last 13 years, there have been gigantic advances. And in fact, when I was diagnosed in 2008, it was just a year or two beyond when doctors stopped doing automatically a mastectomy with somebody walked in with what I had. They changed their approach. They noticed that the outcomes were in fact better sometimes if they treated cancers before operating, and that an instant mastectomy followed by chemotherapy was not necessarily right for everybody. It is right for some people, but it's not right for everybody. And when they looked at me, they saw that there were drugs that should work. So they said, we're going to postpone the surgery. That was an advance that had happened very recently before I had walked in with what I walked in with. And in the last 13 years, there's all sorts of other stuff that's happening, in particular having to do with gene therapies. And of course, there are immunotherapies. There's all kinds of clinical trials out there. When you look for a doctor and for a hospital and for a treatment center, just look for somebody who has broad knowledge of what's out there and a lot of experience in treating what it is that you have. It will really, really, really help you when you get to the point of choosing treatments and going through the journey of whatever your treatments are. Fear and fury. A lot of people get extremely angry when they're diagnosed. I understand. It did not happen to me. I did not get angry. I understand that the loss of control over your life is something that can anger people. Feeling like it's unjust, can anger people. But I had people say, aren't you mad? I'm like, well, who am I going to be mad at? I didn't really know why I should be mad. What I knew was I had this thing and it needed to be dealt with. And of course, I'm not happy about it, but I wouldn't say angry. I was frightened. I was paralyzed, but I was not angry. But in any event, coping with either fear or fury is something that is a spiritual exercise and needs to be dealt with in that context as well as the medical context. Half of life is just showing up, is the next subheading. It really is true. Once you find really good doctors, and once you find people that you believe, have your best interests in heart and have the skill and the ability to take care of you, the training, the background, the experience, your job becomes a lot easier. It really does become showing up and letting them do what they do and working with them, reporting if there are things that you don't feel are right, asking questions, basically being their partner in this. But showing up and allowing them to do it is a very big step. There are a lot of people who will not show up for chemos. I can understand that, to get yourself out of bed, dressed, into a cab or a car or a bus or a train, whatever, to go down to, get what is drugs that will help you, but which is also poison, poured into you for 3-4 hours at a time, sometimes longer, is a decision that's not easy to make. And that, again, has to do with your spirit helping to drive this. And just showing up is a tremendous battle that is a spiritual battle as well as a physical one. Next subheading is praying in a tube. There's a lot of testing that goes on when you're under cancer treatment. There's MRIs, there's PET scans, there's all sorts of stuff. There's lots of blood draws, So this actually is a rather practical chapter on things you can do to put your mind in a good place and your spirit in a good place while all of this testing is happening. There's a chapter on losing my hair, which I hated doing, and which was very upsetting for me. If a woman was cured of cancer by means unknown to us, and everyone declared it a miracle, would the chance of scientifically replicating this cure be more or less likely? Well, I think you answered the question, Mike, by saying that the means was unknown to us. If the means was known to us, we could replicate it. If it was unknown to us, that means that by definition, we can't replicate it because we didn't know what was done that called it a miracle. So, I mean, again, I think that there's so many things out there that can affect your course and your prognosis, and why things happen. As a priest, I always believe that God has a hand in it one way or another. And I whether it's through the doctors and through normal treatment, everybody wants to be cured without going, everybody just wants the instant miracle. Let's put it that way. Like, for example, had I walked in with what I walked in with to NYU one day, I had a 3.5-inch tumor, and then I came back the next day with no intervening treatment whatsoever, and the tumor was gone. That would be something that would fall under that category, and I think a lot of people would call it a miracle. Now, it is possible that something happened in the natural world that actually got rid of the tumor, but we don't know what it is. So we would not be able to replicate it. So I think that's where I would leave that, because it's a little bit of a circular question, because the way it's described, it means that it's not replicable, whatever, whatever that word would be. I'm not blowing off the question. I just understand. I'm trying to get my mind around it. Losing my hair was very, very, very traumatic to me. I'm not particularly vain. I did not spend a lot of time on my hair before it began coming out in clumps and patches from the chemo. And I wound up, like we all do, if you're under chemo, you shave your head because it's just, you can't wait for it to fall out. It's ridiculous. So I went and I got clippers and I shaved my head, and I looked in the mirror, and that's when you look like a cancer patient, and so I had a tremendously hard time with that. But this is a miracle. This is God showing up. The moment I looked at myself in the mirror, and I think I'm sure I was crying. I sat down on my couch, and I basically resolved not to come. It's okay, Mike. Yeah, not. I basically decided not to leave my house until my hair grew back. I was like, I don't want anybody to see this. I don't want to show up outside looking like this. Literally at that moment, there was a knock on my door, and a woman who's a friend of mine, but who works as a housekeeper in my building, um, was there. She came to, I think she'd done my laundry, and she took one look at me and she smiled, this big smile, no thought process at all. She just grinned and said, "Man, you look cool like that. I love the way you look with no hair. You should keep that. You should keep that even after you're all done with this. You look terrific." And that was the only thing that made it possible for me to go on. And it happened right at the second when I needed. That's what I mean by being surrounded by miracles and God sending angels and God sending help and God sending what you need for that moment to keep going. And I'll never forget it. Yvette and I joke about it all the time to this day, 13 years later. And, it really was, just a remarkable moment. But different people handle different aspects of treatment differently. I got less sick physically from the chemo than a lot of people do, but I got very emotionally upset with losing the hair, which some people don't. They're more focused on other things. Everybody's different, and you're going to have different reactions to different types of treatment. To Google or not to Google? Oh, man, this is important. Because we have all of the information of the world at our fingertips in search engines. We Google everything and we read everything. And here's the thing, unless you are a trained, experienced oncologist, breast surgeon, whoever, you're not going to understand a lot of what is online. Some of it's going to be misinformation. A lot of it's going to be true. But you're making a judgment off of what you read on Google should never happen without your consulting with your doctors, ever. Again, I'll give you an example from my own treatment. A mistake that I made that gave me absolutely the wrong idea of what was going to happen. I had the test after the treatment, before the surgery, PET scan, and you get the reports in the apps, you get them online. So I read the report, and the report said that where the tumor had been and the way that the remnants were, a lot of the surgery would have to involve removal of chest muscles, and that I likely would lose the use of my right arm and the right, like basically from the shoulder down, and my arm, that I would be, kind of non-functional or minimally functional there. And I was very upset. The report was absolutely unequivocal. And it was, I'm sure absolutely true. They looked at the MRI, they looked at where things were, the layers of where things were, and they wrote that in the report. I went in a day or two later to see my breast surgeon, and I was crying, and she said, "What's wrong? You're doing well." I said, "Didn't you read the report from the MRI?" She said, "Of course I read the report." I said, "Am I not going to be able to use my right arm?" And here's my right arm. I'm using it. I can do anything with my right arm. She said, No. She said, "Of course, I saw that." She said, "I read thousands of these things." She said, "That's always," she used the word overread, meaning that they look at a picture of something and they read something into it that may not necessarily be physically true if you know how somebody's body is really built. She said, "I know where your tumor was." She said, "I don't have to take out your chest muscles. It's above all of that. That's something that very commonly happens with MRIs." She said, "Don't worry about that at all. That's not going to be the case." And in fact, it is absolutely not the case. My right arm is absolutely not inhibited in any way, shape, or form. I'm tremendously strong on that side. I don't have lymph nodes on that side anymore. And I stay away. I've been told I can do anything I want, and I'm basically left-handed, but I bowl right-handed. I don't bowl anymore. Just because it makes me uncomfortable, not because I can't, just because I don't like the idea. That I had an operation on that side, there's a thing on that side. It's completely psychological. It is not at all physical. So be extremely, extremely careful about information that you read, even when it's given to you by your medical people, or even when you investigate something. on your own online. Please talk to your doctors. Don't consider yourself judge, jury, and expert on this stuff. It's very complicated. You need a lot of information in order to be able to judge things correctly. Chemosurgery, radiation, prayer, or climb every mountain is another subtitle. One of the parts of the cancer journey is that whenever you feel like you have something handled, like you know what the chemo is going to do to you, and you're not thrilled with it, but you know what it's going to do, and you have a pattern, that finishes. And then you have to do something else. So I had 2 different courses of chemo, and it changed drastically. My reactions changed drastically between the first set of drugs and the second set of drugs. Then that was over. And okay, I knew what to do with the chemo. Now, what about the surgery? Then we had to prepare for surgery, go through the surgery. An entirely different set of side effects, things to worry about like that. And then third, I had radiation, and that was a whole other thing, daily radiation for 7 weeks. So it looks in psychologically, it just looks like mountain after mountain after mountain. It's like you've climbed one mountain, you've gotten to the top, and then you look and there's another mountain in front of you. You have to climb that one. And that can be very wearing emotionally and spiritually and psychologically. So that's what that chapter is about. How quickly do I need to make a decision about breast cancer treatment? That depends on how serious, well, it depends on how serious your doctors tell you that it is. With me, I had to make a decision yesterday. My doctor, when I finally went to see her, the one that I wound up with at NYU, literally ran me down the hall to get me into an emergency mammogram, sonogram, MRI, and then start me on chemo. And then I went to the oncologist. The second they had the results back from biopsies, all of that stuff, they put me right into chemo. Your doctor will let you know if this is a matter of making very quick decisions, or whether you can take a little time and think about it. You also have to see whether you want to get a second opinion, whether that's I'm of the opinion that can never hurt. But again, if time is of the essence and you've found doctors that you feel you can trust, then go with them. Cancer is not something you want to leave sitting around, so it's something that you do want to get to as rapidly as possible. And sometimes the doctors will give you a choice in treatment. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they'll say, hey, this is really what we got to do here. And it's not going to be choose A, B, or C. Sometimes it is, in particular with, like, for example, prostate cancer. Now, men have quite often have a chance of 2 or 3 or 4 different treatments that are all, that all have roughly the same prognosis for the particular cancer, that they have. I haven't heard that quite so much with breast cancer, but again, I've been out of treatment for 13 years, so it might be that there are more choices. I would certainly not put it off, but go by your doctor's timeline. If they say, we got to start this as soon as possible, then, please, make whatever decisions you need to make as soon as possible. Will my cancer treatment affect my ability to have a baby? I have absolutely no idea. It depends on, that's a question for your doctor. There are different cancer treatments for different cancers. For ovarian cancers, for example, it very well might. Breast cancer, I really don't know. I know that that in my case, and I think in a lot of people's cases, the chemo puts you into menopause. And so that obviously affects, your fertility. But that is not a question that I am qualified to answer. That is something that really should go straight to your doctor. And they will know that, because certain things very clearly do affect fertility and other things absolutely do not. So it depends on your cancer, what type of cancer, where it is, the treatment, and, what they're going to use to cure you, to treat you. And not my area at all. I'm happy to bless you as a priest as you go through it. but I'm not going to tell you about whether you can have a baby. That's a question for the MDs. Anybody else? And we're coming up to the end of our time here. We have, I think, about 5 more minutes. There is a lot of question about suffering. I got lots of questions about whether suffering can actually ever be good for you. The answer is yes, absolutely, sometimes. But is suffering something that God wants you to go through? No, God didn't want his own son to suffer either. God doesn't want suffering, but God can use suffering. And even David in the Psalms said, "It is good that I have been afflicted," because suffering does change you. It changes the way that you view your life, view the world, view the way you treat other people, view the way you treat yourself. It does change your outlook. People who have gone through a treatment for a life-threatening disease have a completely different outlook on life than before they went in. I'm no different. And in many ways, I'm a very much improved priest, person, everything. So that's something that we need to consider carefully. Again, not considering it a directive, from God, but the fact that good can come of it, and some suffering seems senseless, and we can't make any sense of it. And I'm not sure that we'll ever be able to on this side of the line of life and death, but but there are certainly cases where it can be. All right, so that's a little bit of what's in the first 2 chapters of the book, about your body and about your spirit for the patient, and then the book finishes with, as I said, chapter 4: loved ones, caregivers, friends, people accompanying a cancer patient on the journey. Some practical advice about what to say to people who have been diagnosed, about what you can expect from people who have been diagnosed. For example, don't be insulted if they don't return your messages or your phone calls immediately. They may not be feeling well, or they may not feel like doing it. They feel like just coping, or they may just need to sleep. Never visit unannounced. Ask about food. Be careful about talking about specific side effects. So are you this? So are you that? Are you not? Like that. Most cancer patients, unless they volunteer the information, do not want to talk about the specifics about what's happening in their body. If they volunteer it, great. But otherwise, it can actually make you sicker to have to talk about, if you feel like eating, for example. I mean, it's something you should just stay away from. Consider whether to minister in person or support from a distance. And then I think the last thing that I'm going to say here today is a lot of people want, and I understand, wanting privacy as you go through something like cancer treatment, but be careful not to close yourself off from your community. Be careful not to turn away people who really can help you, love you, pray for you, and who may actually be ministered to you while they are ministered by you while they are ministering to you. For example, I had one friend who very much wanted to help me during my cancer treatments, because his closest friend from childhood had been undergoing cancer treatments, but she lived across the country, and he couldn't be there. And so in a way, it made him feel better to help me, because it was also like helping her. So this can mean a lot to a lot of people, and you mean a lot to a lot of people. And so this is a way of actually growing a very supportive, very deep community. It's almost like being in the armed service. You're going through something together, something life-threatening together, and you can get very deep, very long-lasting bonds by going through this with people that you love and that you trust. So, again, the book is called Lessons of the Spirit, a Christian Spiritual Companion for Your Breast Cancer Journey. The Spanish version is Lecciones del Espíritu. You can please go to my website, at the bottom of the screen, RhondaRubinson.com. And you can read excerpts of the book there. And there's also sermons, essays, other things. There's some ordering information for the book. And if you want to email me and ask me anything directly, my email is rev.rhondarubinson@gmail.com. Thank you. I wish you all health. Again, I want to thank you, Reader's Magnet, and everybody taking part in the Festival of Storytellers. It's been a magnificent experience, and I hope that you find that this book helps you or someone else. And, I wish blessings on you. All right? God bless. Thank you for watching. I really, really, really appreciate it. Bye-bye.